in your face.
Right. It's the exact same pattern. It's the exact same pattern as before.
Moving your queen, you feel like you're moving like a truck full of gold.
Wait, say that
Scary,
again?
you know? Okay, so in Valorant, there's like an operator. It's like the most expensive gun. So when you buy it, like you want to be really careful that round. I'm like, this is my operator. If I accidentally move her too close to a pawn, he's gonna freaking go backwards and take her or something. So yeah, it makes it guys.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused because for me the bishop is the operator. But anyway, I get the point. I get the point.
Because he's the sniper. I got it.
Let's just say, for example, I'm going to play here now. I'm not going to blunder and trade these bishops. The way that you try to attack is actually very similar. You bring this knight here. And so now let's work out. So which way do you capture if I take with the knight? You have 2 captures, right?
Yeah. But you say which way, so which order is better?
Well, so when I say which way do you capture, I'm just saying that you have 2 options. It's not like it's not the trick question where, you know, okay, you know, like you have multiple ways to take, like like there's got to be.
Don't you always take? Well, not always, but you prefer to take with pawn first.
So almost always when you play this this London system, you take with the pawn. Now in this case, it's very effective because the bishop protects the pawn.
Yep, and it's attacking too. Yeah. So
it's a fork. So you're gonna win a bishop or a knight in return for this 1 pawn. So I'm not gonna blunder and take with a knight. I'm actually gonna take with the bishop here. But again, what's the correct capture? Right. And so now your bishop still protects the pawn. Now it's not a fork because if I move my knight, there's nothing to capture.
Yeah.
But if I move my knight here, now I think the order you should be looking for is, first of all, checks. Are there any checks here?
Nope.
Right. So if there are no checks, then I think you should be looking at like captures where you take your opponent's piece. Is there anything that you can capture of your opponent or not?
Or this. But I'd be down to trade these knights.
Well, so let's think about it. How many ways are you attacking or how many ways can you capture this knight? It's 2. How many ways is your opponent defending this knight?
Just 1.
Right. So actually you will take. Now again, this is a London system. So what is the most important piece that you have when you play this opening?
I've never learned that. Is it this bishop? Is it my upper pawn? It is this bishop.
This bishop. When you play this setup, it's the most important piece because it's eyeing this pawn.
Attacking. Okay, got it. So I don't want to take with the bishop. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, and now you're ahead by a pawn. And the bishop is really good because.
Oh, true. Speaking of, something I struggle with a little bit is that in the London system, especially after you move your knight to d2.
Okay, so I'll go back.
Yeah, I feel like usually you do this, but then your bishop isn't protected. So should you just not push this pawn unless your queen will defend the bishop?
Generally the only time that, like I said, that you want to worry about pushing this pawn is if your opponent pushes this pawn to it, sort of threaten to capture this pawn in the center. The main reason people push this pawn is because, let me just set up a different position, is let's just say you reach some position like this. The main reason that you push this pawn is so that you can recapture with this pawn here towards the center.
I see.
Versus, say, playing something like this where you're capturing with this pawn towards the center. Most of the time, the reason you push this pawn is so that you can recapture and keep this connect 3 sort of with these pawns in a row.
Okay, and like, what if I'm in a situation where
don't worry about it if they don't push. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, if they do push, and then they do this, and then however they do it, they try to go for an attack on. Oh, sorry, my bishop's not there. But when he is there, and now he's not being defended by anything.
So it's kind of hard to play like that. I mean, I guess what I would say is maybe your opponent can play a move like queen here. And I guess the simplest way to explain this is probably just move your queen here, and if they try to move the bishop here, you can move your bishop here and put the bishop, if they try to trade, you can keep the bishop on the diagonal by moving it back to the c2 square.
Ooh, okay.
And secondarily, if there's also, they can try to push this pawn here to prevent you from getting your bishop on this really nice square, or this really nice diagonal towards this pawn, in front of the rook. And if they try to do that, what you can do is you can actually push this pawn
and then trade and then do it,
and then you take, yeah, and your next move you'll put the bishop back here because the pawn isn't preventing you from moving the bishop to the center.
Okay, hold on. Just random moves. But if my bishop was already here and we were in this position and then you did this,
and now you put the bishop
move
here.
It back, yeah.
Well, actually, it's also important you don't put it on this square. Well, why do you think that I thought this square was better than this one? If I put the bishop here, what's the problem with this move?
I like when my rook and my queens look at each other. Like, I got your back. I got your back. You know?
Exactly. So like, if you put the bishop here, the rook can't come into the game. The bishop's just very much in the way. So you want to put the bishop on this square so that you can always bring your rook to one of the whatever square it is, but you can bring the rook into the game.
Okay, and then I go for the
right. Well, actually, here you don't even need to do that. You can actually completely ignore this because your bishop's on the diagonal. The reason you had to do that earlier, if they try to push here, is because you can't get the bishop on this diagonal. The pawn covers the square, so you need to find a way to get the bishop there.
Oh, okay. So I don't mind if my bishop's here instead of there?
Not really. So the reason this is so bad is because what happens is you can kind of completely ignore, everything is closed off. So this is, like, this whole queen side is closed. You see how the pawns, they're just blocking the central part of the board.
True. Other question. Sometimes with the London system, I'm just like, what the fuck do I do with my queen?
So,
I feel like sometimes it works out to just like put her on e2 and have her kind of controlling her minions, but sometimes it also feels useless. I know, as you said, like if I do have an attack going here, then I try to do that, but otherwise, do I move her at all?
Generally you don't. So I'm just gonna play some normal moves here, and something like this. Now again, what you want to do is you want to move the knight here, and the reason you do this is because what you really would like to do is move your queen to this h5 square and put pressure towards the pawn in h7. But right now the knight's kind of preventing that. So if I ever take the knight, when you take with the pawn, your queen actually can come to this square and attack the pawn in h7, because the knight will have to move, right?
Yeah, or you take and then I take,
right,
and then I'm attacking anyways.
Well, you're actually just ahead by a knight here, so that doesn't mean you're going to win the game, but it's a big blunder materially because you're way ahead. Okay. So you actually don't really worry about the queen and the rook. The main thing you're playing for is you would really love to put the knight here for a few reasons. One of the reasons you put the knight here is because if your opponent can play, let me just make some random moves here. If your opponent can break the center, like open this up, open up this diagonal for the bishop, black is doing very well here. The biggest issue in this position for black is that this bishop, even if I push this pawn, it doesn't really do much. It can't go to this square because you'll capture, and let me just make a random move. Like, even if the bishop is here, this is a closed diagonal. There's a lot of stuff in the way, so the bishop isn't really a very effective piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, let's just say even if I move the knight here, for example, there's still a pawn in the way.
Yeah, I see that. I was gonna ask, well, before, when you were in a situation similar to this and we were trading around this square, what if he moves his queen to back it? So okay, I'm gonna try to set up a actual sort of real position that could happen here. So let's just say move the bishop. You move the bishop back here because you want to capture towards the center with this pawn. By the way, also, this is another reason you don't just do a normal developing move.
because if black captures, you see you're capturing away from the center with the central pawn.
Wait, go back. How do I decide when to push up versus when to push my bishop back?
So I would say at the very start, until you've moved this bishop or this knight to this square, you don't move the knight in the center.
Okay.
So yeah.
But aren't the trades equivalent already?
What do you mean?
Like if this was here.
Right, but the reason you don't want you could do this move, but
you
it's
just have no pressure yet to do the move.
Yeah,
forward,
basically what happens if you play an order like this, I think your opponent can kind of take advantage of the fact that you have not developed your bishop or your rook here, perhaps. But mainly it's just sort of about the theme. It's more like the theme, as opposed to anything. But you can play this if you want to. It's not something that, like, at your level an opponent can capitalize on. If you're playing someone much stronger, that's where, like, the ordering really matters. But I think where you're at, the most important thing is remembering the ideas. It's not about, like, okay, why do I move this knight versus, you know, moving the bishop or moving the knight. It's kind of like something where you just want to focus on the general idea, because your opponents aren't going to be good enough to really punish you for playing an order that maybe isn't the best.
Okay, sounds good.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this pawn here. So again, now that I'm threatening to capture, so I push this pawn. What's your reply?
I believe just this.
Very good. So now I'm going to move my knight here. You should finish your development. Actually, I would say always think about developing this bishop first so that you can castle instead of moving this knight.
Okay.
Great. And so now I'm going to castle. And now what I would recommend is you move this knight again.
So I hold off on the castling?
Right, because the thing is, if you castle here, your opponent can play. No, actually, you know what? Just castle. Ignore me. Just ignore it.
No, I was gonna say I don't mind holding off on it, because if you do take and then I'm forced to take, it kind of makes it a little ugly.
Well, I think actually, you know, just ignore it, because if you castle here, the problem is that your opponent can take, and when you take back,
yeah.
The difference is you've actually castled, so you have these.
So
these
I can't
pawns,
take advantage of that file.
Yeah, exactly, because the rook is here.
Yeah, so I'd much rather not castle.
So yeah, I would recommend moving this knight. And the reason again is that if I capture, which way do you take back? Right, and so now I'm going to move this knight to attack the pawn twice.
I see. I could do this if I wanted to defend it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now again, think about
That's
the concept.
not bad.
Why would it be bad?
I guess mentally I always want to like have this nice little 3-line in case I want to castle on one side or the other.
Right, but again, I think the thing that's really important here is to think about the theme. So let's just say I push this pawn. My bishop is going to develop, but how do you try to attack on the king side towards where my king is?
I have my queen. I could start moving my knight over.
Right. So in this case, if you move the queen, I can kind of just ignore it and push a pawn. So you really need a little bit more here. Now, the reason in the other order or the other variation I showed it was different is because you had a third piece. You had this rook, which was also attacking. So all the ideas with moving the queen out right away were very, very strong. But here you kind of need a little bit more. So what you do is you move the knight. And where would you like to put this knight? If you could just pick this knight off the square and put it somewhere else, where would you like to put it?
That he can actually jump to, or just anywhere?
I mean, basically, if you're trying
then
to attack,
here.
Right, and then after this, okay,
and
so I'll just make a move
to also attack.
Right, so exactly. So the point is, when you get these pawns like this, you want to use the bishop and the knight to, and then the queen eventually to go after
this piece, and he can actually move there safely. Got it.
So generally, when you put this knight in the center, if your opponent captures, the idea is always that you want to make sure this pawn is protected, and then you want to bring this knight immediately as fast as you can over to the king side where the black king is.
Okay.
So
I see the attacking ways.
So that's kind of that's sort of what you want to do. Now let's say your opponent decides, you know what, I don't want to capture. I'm gonna put more pressure where now I have 1 2 3 attacking your knight.
Yeah, this has happened before, and that makes my brain boom.
Right, now the problem is that, and like again, I think I've even said this, probably Anna and Botez, they've all said it, is you don't want to push a pawn next to your king. So it's very hard to play this next move, but if you're playing the London system, you push this pawn, yeah. And you sort of overprotect this knight. This knight is really strong here in the center of the board.
Is there any way he can attack it more than me?
So the only way to try to attack the knight, well, I mean, you're protecting it with 2 pawns, so yeah, I would need like a pawn to attack it. So for example, I could say move my knight here, and if you were to move your knight, I could maybe push the pawn to remove the knight from the central square.
How do I prevent that?
Okay, so
I guess maybe I don't, and I just target this even harder.
So if you move the knight and I push the pawn, yeah, so you don't really want to move the knight here. So you had the right idea. So how do you try to attack? Towards where the king is? I don't know why I keep wanting to say to bring my queen out, but I don't think it's that. It's correct, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, see, that's the thing.
I don't really see what else I can reasonably get over there. He's gonna take a minute moving around. So I guess I just apply the pressure.
I think the thing is, what you're kind of assuming that like it's more complex than it is. That it's like what worked in a different situation isn't going to work here. But the ideas are almost always the same. That's why this opening is pretty easy for beginners to understand, because it's almost always the same idea. You're almost always going to put the knight here and try to attack with the queen and the bishop. Or or for example, if your opponent like trades, then you're going to bring the knight over and bring the queen and use the bishop. And it's generally very similar. It's just a question of, are you using like a bishop
that because then I can learn easier.
So like that's the thing, is it feels like when I say this, you're assuming like, well, it can't be that because it's too obvious. It has to be more complicated than that. But the idea is always like, the ideas are always,
I think also because you're generally told like, don't bring your queen out too soon. But I don't think those are, I don't know. Like, it's a decent rule of thumb, but maybe not something super applicable to the London system.
It's very kind of opening specific. So like something like this London system with the white pieces, you'll almost never have a situation where, for example, when you're playing with the black pieces, where you can bring a queen out or you can avoid castling. But in the London, that's kind of how it works. So now you move the queen here, so I'm gonna take this free knight with my pawn. So I want to see if you can find the checkmating pattern again. Okay.
I know I gotta start moving these guys to figure out what is the best order. Oh, I think it is this, because I'm blocking his exit, and then he has to go there, and then I move my bishop, and then it's a discovered check.
Okay, so without overcomplicating, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, that's checkmate.
Yay! Okay, I got it now. 3rd time's the charm.
So this is why it's so important. Now I'm gonna set up another one just to see if you remember the pattern. So okay, let's say I take this knight. It's slightly different, but it's similar. So find the checkmate. Actually, you know what? Let me set it up like this. Find the checkmate here.
Okay. I think I do another discovered. Do you want me to talk it through or just try it?
Well, what is your first instinct, kind of? What's the first instinct here to do?
Well, if it's similar to before, and if my pieces aren't going to get taken, I like the discovered check because I'm kind of taking up more space in a sense.
Okay.
Whereas here, I feel like I'm overlapping a little bit.
Okay, so let's say you check, and I go here.
I think maybe then I do this.
Well, but I can just capture.
True. If I do this, then you go there. And then I do that.
Okay, so let's go check. Again, what are the checks that you have in this position? How do you attack the king?
This one or this one safely.
What are all the ways that you can attack the king here?
Oh wait, so definitely this one, otherwise you just capture.
And what else?
This.
Okay, and what else?
This. In your face.
Right, it's exact same pattern. It's exact same pattern as before.
Sorry, I think I get so like allergic scared to pieces being near me sometimes, especially a pawn. When you're like moving your queen, you feel like you're moving like a truck full of gold.
Wait, say that again.
You know, like when you're moving your queen around. Okay, have you ever played an FPS game?
Yeah, of course I have. Yeah,
like CS:GO, you know.
I mean, I play like Valorant and Fortnite primarily, but
okay, so in Valorant there's like an operator. It's like the most expensive gun, so when you buy it, like you want to be really careful that round, because if you lose it, you're just ruining your whole eco. That's how I feel moving my queen. I'm like, this is my operator. If I accidentally move her too close to a pawn, he's gonna freaking go backwards and take her or something. So yeah, it makes it guys.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused because for me the bishop is the operator. But anyway, I get the point. I get the point.
Because he's the sniper. I got it. But so is she.
Yeah, you're right. Like the queen is much more powerful. That's true. No, that's a good point. No, I get your point. Yeah, I think the main thing that I'm trying to show though is like when you use like the harmony of like the two pieces, like the bishop and the queen, or like a knight and the queen. But I get what you're saying. I think in general, just remember these ideas. Like I don't even know how it's like a triangle or something, but it's just like if you have some option where you have like a queen and a bishop really close to the king like this, there's this forced checkmating pattern. And that's why, like, when I was saying with like the puzzles, I was saying like you should select a theme, is because these sorts of themes, if you do like if you do like 10 or 20 of them in a row, that it'll just become like you'll see it every single time. Okay. So yeah, so like in this position, if I push this pawn over the knight, you go all in for this attack. And when I take, it's just that it's again a very similar checkmating pattern. Queen covers the square, king goes over, check, and then checkmate. So and also like in this position,
so freaking cool.
Yeah, so it's like in general the whole purpose of this opening is basically what you don't want your opponent to do is you don't want them to be able to push this pawn and bring this bishop out on this diagonal. So you make sure to put this knight here, and then you push the pawn to reinforce this knight, where like in this position there's no way that I can ever really capture it without pushing a pawn. Like neither of these pawns
basically trying to like create an attack along like this part of the board.
Yeah, everything is basically to the left of the
break it. Yeah, not let him break it. Like,
so like if you think about this position, like if you look at the bishops, this bishop is very bad here because it's behind these pawns, so this bishop would love to come out on this diagonal, but it can't. And even if I get the bishop like here, it's still very bad. So the idea is
it's very stuck.
Like is if I don't, let's just say I don't trade for this knight, because you still do the same thing. So what's the one other piece that's sort of, where would you like this knight to be? Right, and beyond that, once again, if you can move the knight, what are the next two squares that you would go to?
Here.
Right. Now in this case, since I haven't really captured, it's not as necessary to do this, but let's just say I move the bishop. Now what you can do is you can castle first.
And why is that your immediate response?
Because basically now that your opponent you've reinforced this knight and your opponent isn't doing anything, you actually try to use what we call a rook lift. So I'm just gonna play a normal move here.
And then you want me to like move my rook like that or something? Really?
Well, I mean, you can't do it in one go because you have bishop in the way.
I need to move this guy. So actually, I should probably move my bishop first.
Both of them are fine, but the point is, again, like this bishop is so strong on this diagonal that like
he needs reinforcement.
Right. So if you think about before with these pawns here, when it wasn't a bishop, it was two pawns, you had an open file for the rook. But here you're gonna do the same thing. So let's just say I push this pawn. You can now move this bishop to attack this knight. And the idea is, again, very straightforward. You want to put the rook here and create a lot of pressure with the rook and with the bishop. So let's just say I push a pawn. What would a logical next move be?
I could do this, but I also kind of just want to remove the defender.
So both moves are good, but I wanted to see if you would spot both the ideas. So yeah, this move is good, and this move is good too. This is actually the best move here, and the reason this is really good is because after I take,
then I have a free check also.
And when I go into the corner,
I see I could probably make some sort of checkmate soon, but see if there's something sooner than that. Oh, no, that gets taken.
So again, like sticking with the themes, this is the correct move.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was like a really fast one.
I mean, there always are going to be other ways to do it, but if you have a basic idea of like this checkmating idea of like using the queen and the bishop, it's almost always going to be right. You just need to make sure that nothing is like, and you're like nothing is like under attack, or you're not going to like lose your queen or lose your bishop.
Okay. Wait, can we play through that?
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So now, how your threat is to make a checkmate, right, with the queen and the bishop?
Yep.
So how can black prevent this? Actually, I have to run to the restroom, so while you're thinking, I'll be right back. Okay.
Ah, thank God. Time to think with no pressure. All right. If I was black here, what do I do? Resign. Okay, what do I actually do? Maybe I find a way to protect this if such a thing exists. Do I bring my broskies out? I think that kind of just blocks him in more. Actually, I think I would push this to block that. I don't know if that's right. I think so, though. But it still feels so losing.
All right, so you figure out how to stop a checkmate?
I think so. Move this pawn up.
Right. Okay, so now I stopped your plan of making a checkmate. So how would you try to... What are some moves to go after this king here? Try to make a checkmate again.
Looking at my knight, but also I'm looking at this. Because then if I take, we're Gucci.
Yep. But the problem with moving the rook is that I will just capture.
Is that you can capture, yeah.
So you have the right idea of like this king and this pawn. So what other ways are there to try and, I would say, attack this pawn in front of the king?
My knights feel so far away.
So like it's not bad, but actually, for example, you could just move your knight here and move the knight to this square to make a checkmate. This is completely reasonable.
It's like 2 moves away.
So this is actually a very good move, and in fact, I would almost say this is a move you should play because it fits in with the theme of bringing the knight and going for a checkmate on h7. You can also go for other checkmates. For example, instead of moving the rook here, you could move the rook here.
I was just gonna say that, but I figure like my opponent would see that and then do this and try to escape.
Very good. So let's say I move the king here. So I want to escape with my king. So now again, you want to look for the king is kind of in the middle of the, it's not in the middle of the board, sorry, it's but it's very open. There's nothing in front.
Can't even move here.
Right. So actually the easiest move to play here is, since I want to run my king out,
to
move the queen here. So my king can't come forward.
Poor guy.
And what happens when I go back? That's checkmate.
Yeah.
So like this isn't so easy to spot necessarily, but the idea like here is that you can move this rook and use the queen of the rook, and that's why in general, if you go back, like don't worry about the specific moves, but the idea of like when you have developed your king here, this idea of lifting the rook to one of these two squares, either this one or this one, is very, very effective here, because you have the bishop, but it's not really enough. So you really need another major piece like the rook or the queen to sort of put pressure towards where the black king is as well.
Okay, I'm very excited to try to do this in my own games.
I think what you need to be aware of in the London especially is that you for example here I can be very tricky. I can like move my queen here, and you can't move the knight here, because if you move the knight here then I just capture.
Yeah, I feel like I've ended up in this situation a lot, and it complicates things.
Right, so the way that I would say this is think about it, how do I put this in a general term, but let's say your opponent brings these three pieces out right away to try and prevent you from putting the knight here.
Yep.
You can actually capture this pawn.
Oh,
and what happens if I capture the pawn back?
I just
so so like if your opponent tries to do this right away to prevent you from bringing the knight to the center of the board and then reinforcing it with your pawn, there's always going to be this trick where you can capture this pawn, and they can't recapture because they lose the queen. If they take the bishop, which way do you capture the bishop again? Right, again, you want to capture towards the center and also opening up this file for the rook on h1 as well.
Yeah.
So
otherwise, if they bring out the queen after my knight is already here, then I reinforce via this.
Right, so when they castle, what's your move? Right, and so now I'm only attacking with two, so when I put the third piece to attack the knight,
then I do this.
Right, and so now you have two pawns, and the knight is basically, it's going to be here forever. They can capture it, but you'll always have pawns behind, so you're not going to be losing any material here.
Okay, what if? Sorry, so many alternate.
No, but I think it's the most important thing though is that like you have a basic idea in your mind. Like you need to make sure your opponent isn't going to capture any of your pieces, but having that basic idea of where you want your knight and like having these pawns to reinforce it here on the central square.
Yeah. What if the queen was already here, but there was also a pawn here? I feel like maybe that's
okay. So let's go back. Really. Okay, so say that again. So you're saying like they let me make a couple of moves. You're saying if they somehow get like this and what, like queen. Okay,
like yeah, if they had support for their dark squared bishop and also support for this pawn, whether it's by the knight being here or pawn being here, so that if I capture, this isn't threatened.
Right, so again, I would say the same thing kind of would apply here. You can put the knight in the center, and if they put the knight here, you can push the pawn again to reinforce it. If that makes sense. Or is there another? I'm saying that basically you're trying to get a setup for black that they can't really get. So like for example, in this position, if they put the knight here,
because yeah,
if they put the knight here, you can still do the same thing. And now if they go here, you just take the pawn again. It's this problem.
And it's unlikely that they will have this pushed already, right?
Okay, so again, they can try to push this pawn here. But if they push the pawn to protect,
but then they won't have the queen. Yeah.
Right. So then what's your next move? Got it. What's your next move?
Then I do bring.
Exactly. And then then now when I try to dislodge it, you push the pawn again to support it.
And then it's defended. Yeah. Okay.
So it's like you're trying to combine all the ideas, but black doesn't have time to get everything in. So it's like if black tries to push the pawn to support this idea and bring the queen, then you take the square. If they go here right away, then you take the pawn.
Okay.
And also, what they would really like to have is something like this with the knight here. Because if you capture the pawn, I can recapture with the knight or the queen, right?
Yeah.
And you also can't move the knight here because now I capture.
Then what do I do?
So again, what you would do here is you move the knight. You can move the knight here. And if they capture, you can recapture either way. And if they move the knight here, you can just push the pawn.
Okay. But basically, they will not be able to have more... I feel like ultimately it comes down to moving your knight up at the right time, though. Like, if I was wasting time doing something else while he did do this and he did do this, then I am kind of left with no options, right?
Exactly, yeah. And also
like had this and was really much stronger than me on this square.
Right, so it all comes down to basically this square and this diagonal, essentially, with like the bishop and these ideas of moving the queen.
Okay.
So that's probably what most people do in the London. Do you have other questions about the specific setup?
I think for me it was mainly just at this point in my learning chess career, it's just about kind of transitioning to the mid game, because I feel like, at least in my rating, that's where the game is kind of decided just by small advantageous trades.
Yeah, I think like also you were saying opening the center of the board. When you play the London, that's not really what it's about, what you should be focusing on. It's really literally focusing on this diagonal and the harmony of using your knights on both of these two squares. Like it's literally like every single time when they offer the trade of the bishops, you need to remember to move the bishop back so that you can capture and open the file. And if they try to if they basically just if they ignore it or something, actually, again, if they push this pawn, what do? Threatening to capture. So what are the themes?
I think I do this.
Right, now remember though, I said when they push this pawn, you want to push the pawn. So if they capture, you can capture back.
To defend it. True.
So it's like you have all the right ideas. So first of all,
and so I can keep capturing towards the center.
Right. So if they push the pawn, you do this. If they don't do that, like they move a knight or something, then you go back to the other plan. You move the knight forward and you reinforce, and eventually you're going to bring this knight and attack towards where the king is.
Okay. Quiz me again. Go.
Okay. All right. So in this position, if I push the pawn,
because I do have to go in like 5 minutes. Quiz me. Go.
Okay. So if they push this pawn, what do you want to do?
Reflect.
Right. Yeah, because you want to capture towards the center.
Capture towards the center. Yes.
Okay. So and if I take, I'm gonna castle. So remember, now you have an open file. So now that you have this open file, do you want to castle or not?
Nope.
So how do you try to exactly? And let's say I take. Okay, let's say I move the knight.
Backup defender.
Okay, yeah, this is one way. You can also take in this case, but it's more about having the idea. So, all right. So let's say that I don't take. Now I'm gonna castle. Right. Let's say I move this knight. You could castle, but exactly. And now, if I capture, it's an even trade. So let me try to put more pressure on the knight. Right. And let's just say I move my bishop.
F4. Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't capture. Do I just try to? I couldn't.
Remember, you've reinforced the knight.
Yep.
But you can't move the queen, so you can't move the queen here. So what was the other piece that's really important? Right, and again, at some point you're going to move the knight. You can also you could also here castle and try to lift the rook. You could castle and try to lift it to attack as well. But both these ideas are very good.
Is there like I guess a tell of when it is better to castle and lift the rook versus just I guess if this isn't traded, it might be better to castle and then lift.
Yeah, I think the one thing to be aware of is that if you move this knight here, maybe your opponent can move their knight in to close the diagonal for your bishop. So like, yeah, that's the one thing is I would say if you move the knight and your opponent can close this diagonal with the pawn and the knight, it might be best to just leave the bishop and the knight where they are so you prevent this and you castle and lift the rook.
If he did do that, would I just move my knight back and try to contest, kind of?
You mean if you had this position?
Yeah.
Well, you would rather not have that happen at all. So you'd rather just leave the bishop and the knight like this. Which is why I'll just do one last quick setup, which is here, for example. Let's say you reach this position. And your opponent puts the bishop here. and you castle, and their opponent moves the knight. The idea behind this setup is your opponent wants to move the knight here because they have 1-2 defending the square.
Ah, I see.
So they'd like to put the knight here and close this diagonal for the bishop. But what you can do is you can kind of also over guard the square and move your queen here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So you have 1 2 3 and your opponent only has 1 2 if they move the knight. And so now once you overprotect, it's actually a very similar idea. Let me just move the rook here. You can once again do a lift, but with your queen by moving the bishop and then lifting the queen to this square and attacking towards the pawn on h7 with the bishop and the queen.
The queen lift.
Yeah, I don't even think that's actually a term, but it's close enough that I mean it's the same thing, just with the queen instead of the rook. I think it's, the reason you don't call it a lift is because the queen can go to like this square. The queen can go all sorts of different ways, whereas the rook, the only way to do it is to sort of put it like that.
So from here, do you trade there?
Yeah, so what you would do is it's very
maybe
similar.
Move first.
So I can't move the knight here because you what would you do?
Just start trading, probably like this
right
first.
And now
Then this.
right, and you're ahead by 1 pawn because we've traded bishops knights, but at the end of the day I lost this pawn that was here. So and let's say I move the knight. What is my idea behind moving this knight? How do I try to remove this knight that's so well placed here?
Like, are you trying to attack it?
Well, I would like to remove this knight. So remember, it's guarded by 2 pawns. So the only way that I can remove the knight is if I can attack it with a pawn. So like, you wouldn't do this, but let's say you push a pawn.
I see.
They can push the pawn to really force your knight out of the square.
Yeah.
So if they do something like this, that's the idea. And so once again, how do you try to attack towards where this king is using this bishop?
I don't know. I don't think I just go for it.
You kind of do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, with my bishop?
Well, no. Remember, the bishop alone is not enough. You always need 1 more piece. Right. So you can do that. You could also be sneaky and
he
go
removed
here.
That.
Right. If you go here and I try to come back, what's your move?
Is this... Oh, wait. That's not checkmate.
You can't take right away.
Yep. Oh, I think I just take this.
Right. And then if I take back,
then
exactly. Yeah, that's just checkmate. So all the ideas, I mean, they involve either like a queen from one of these 2 squares with this bishop or lifting the rook. So I mean, I think it should be pretty straightforward in what you're trying to do. But again, the main thing is that you want to put this knight here and reinforce it, and then eventually bring this knight in or castle and use the rook or the queen, but something involving this diagonal. Always involving this diagonal.
Okay, I will try it in my games and hopefully I learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just try to remember what the idea is. Don't worry about like a specific move. Try to remember how you're trying to make the checkmate, like with the bishop and the queen, or with like the rook and the bishop. And then additionally, sometimes you also need to get this knight to this square to create more pressure. So it's like the idea is more important than the actual moves. If you remember what the idea is, then you can sort of work it out in a straightforward method.
Okay, thank you so much. This is actually insanely helpful because I feel like I was kind of focusing on just figuring out openings and how to get a game started. Now I'm at a point of actually kind of, creating an attack against the king, and then hopefully I'll figure out how to close it in endgame, and I think it'll kind of all
I think like
well.
endgame, really you shouldn't worry about that. It's not going to happen that much. The one thing I would say is if you do get into a position with very limited material, remember that if you have pawns that are going down the board, you need to use them. Especially that's the most important thing for like the end game. But I think you're pretty well set, and you should win your first match. So no pressure, but I think you'll win the first one. So it'll be fun to watch. Yeah,
I'm looking at it as good practice either way. So.
Great. Yeah, and you still have a month, so plenty of time.
Yay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good rest of your stream.
I hope we can like keep doing lessons every now and then, and you'll see the progression, ideally.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah,
and the progression in our lessons and the topics we cover.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the start. There's still a month, so yeah, plenty of time.
Yay, thank you so much. Have a good
Yeah,
one.
no problem. You too. Bye.
Bye.